Alright, what's up everybody? So today's video, I just wanted to go through a handful of questions that are very common for me to get on the channel. So ever since I started obviously making videos, there's a handful of questions that I constantly see kind of resurfacing periodically, some more frequently than others. And a lot of them are good questions, or they're just questions that I know people are going to ask forever. So rather than just like answering them in a comment that nobody's going to see my reply to, or dedicating like an entire video to something that doesn't need an entire video dedicated to it, I figured I would just answer all of them here. Most of them are going to be training related, but some of them aren't. And some of them are kind of funny, and I just wanted to address them. So with all that said, I'll probably do another like part 2 to this, and I expect and anticipate to get a lot of other kind of like common questions that people want to see answered in the comments to this one. So in all likelihood, that will lead to a part 2 of what I'm filming right now. So the first question, we'll get this one out of the way, kind of like the generic YouTube fitness question that every content creator probably gets all the time. How much volume do you do? Right now, on somewhat of a lower volume, lower frequency program that I'm doing just to kind of like maintain and slowly recomp, I'm doing 2 to 3 sets per muscle group per session, and I'm training twice per week per muscle group. So what I'm doing here is about 4 to 6 sets per week per muscle group. It's pretty straightforward. It's enough to get a little bit of growth. I find that I do need a little bit more. I just need to have a little bit of room for error and just a little bit more overall stimulus at this point in my training to keep growing, but this does a fine job kind of like maintaining or getting me some at least decent growth, even if it's a little bit on the slower side, but it's still sufficient volume. And I would say if I was trying to optimize everything, I would change my split up just a little bit to include a little bit more leg work. So I'd likely go back to a push-pull legs push-pull and do about 5 to 8 total sets per week per muscle group of direct work. So when I'm saying like when I'm saying 4 to 6 sets per week, I'm not saying like rows for the back. I'm doing like a row for the traps, then I'm doing something for my lats, I'm doing something for my rear delt. So everything has that much of like direct work, not just like, oh, bench press is for your chest, shoulders, and triceps, right? So pretty straightforward stuff. I know most people kind of already know this kind of stuff about me anyways. So in this week, Barbell is launching their anniversary sale. It's their 11th anniversary. So what they're doing here, it's going to be a buy 2, get 1 free. And it doesn't apply to everything in the store, but it does apply to a lot. So a couple of things that it does apply to. The sale just specifically does run for about a month, starting on March 24th, which is obviously a couple days ago at this point, up until April 28th. So the products that it includes, the Motive dress shirts, the Anything shorts, which I love personally, the Drop Hem tees, same thing. The Havoc and Scout Henleys. Henleys are one of my personal favorites. If I'm not wearing a polo, that's typically what I'm wearing. Anything chinos, polos, and there is going to be more stuff too. Next question, are you Canadian? Everybody thinks I'm Canadian, but I'm actually not. So I don't know where the accent came from. It makes no sense. I sound like I'm straight out of Toronto, but I've never been to Canada. I don't even have my passport, so nope, not Canadian, can't be. I don't know why I have a Canadian accent. It doesn't make any sense. Next one, are you Mike Mentzer? So I'm actually not Mike Mentzer. I know based on the mustache that I now have and the haircut, I don't look like him, but there's a similar resemblance that I get where people are coming from with that. So contrary to popular belief, I'm not a Canadian Mike Mentzer. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Next question, what is your diet like? So this one's pretty boring. My ultimate philosophy on bodybuilding and nutrition is be a little bit more maximalist and detail oriented when it comes to your training, and be a little bit more kind of like minimalist isn't probably the right word, but generally speaking, a little bit more minimalist, a little bit more straightforward, and don't overthink your diet. Just be healthy. So some of the basic principles I follow diet-wise are going to be get enough fruit, get enough vegetables, get enough protein, and limit saturated fat. If there's a fifth kind of principle I follow, it's just make sure my calories are supporting whatever I want to do with my body weight. And it's really as simple as that. As far as like what my specific diet looks like, I know people are very interested in that. So I'm not a foodie. I don't really like food that much. I don't enjoy cooking, and more importantly, I hate doing dishes. So I I use the least amount that I have to kind of get by. So typically what this looks like, if you're to look at my diet, like an average day, and it will fluctuate, but I'd say this is probably with 75% consistency. Breakfast will be Greek yogurt. It's a higher protein type. I usually go for the oikos. It's either the 000, which has, I believe, 17 or 20 grams of protein per serving, or the Pro, just depending on what the grocery store has. I'll add in X granola of choice, whatever we have, and then I will occasionally mix in some type of fruit, and usually I'll just do like a frozen type of berry mix or a freeze-dried berry mix, which I find is a little bit better because the frozen one just makes the texture all weird. So that's typically what I'll do for breakfast, and then sometimes I'll have a protein bar with that, especially on a training day when I want a little bit more food. For lunch, typically what I'll do is a smoothie, and the smoothie is pretty straightforward, but I'll give you guys kind of a quick breakdown in case you want to try it for yourself. So what I'll do is I'll get like a frozen fruit mix, and it's like one of those 3 or 4 pound bags from the grocery store, and typically the base of this is going to be some combination of mango, pineapple, peach, strawberry, grapes, or a couple other random fruits here or there, but that's generally the gist of it. And this will cover pretty much all the fruit that I need for that day. What I'll also do is mix in about maybe 1 to 2 servings of frozen chopped spinach. So it's a very easy way just to sneak in some spinach. You can't even taste it in the smoothie, it just makes it green. And then what else I'll add is going to be, I do soy milk, and it's not because I'm a soy boy, it's just because I don't like beans. So not a huge fan of beans. So this soy milk basically lets me kind of sneak beans into my diet. It's obviously very healthy. So that covers my like beans for the day. And then the only other things I'll add to this would be, I'll add like a scoop of protein powder, just vanilla, because chocolate goes weird with fruit. And if you disagree with me on that, you're wrong. I'll add a scoop of creatine, about 5 grams daily, and then I'll add in flaxseed meal, about 2 tablespoons of that, just to get in some healthy fats. So that's typically my lunch, and then I'll usually make 1 or 2 other things with that. If I'm bulking, it'll probably be like some homemade trail mix with a base of walnuts and a couple other nuts and seeds or dried fruit. And then I will add potentially like a bagel or something like that, or a protein bar again if I want to have 2 for the day. That's generally speaking what my lunch is going to be. And then my go-to dinner, and of course dinner is going to vary the most because sometimes I have it with my fiance, sometimes I go out. Like, it just varies based on the day, but I'd say 3 to 4 nights a week typically I'll have something along the lines of like maybe a serving and a half of chicken, and then what I'll do is I will make mashed potatoes, and I get the frozen ones from Trader Joe's. They come into like these little sticks. They almost look like like a mozzarella stick or like a cheese stick or something, but it's just mashed potato. And then what I'll do with that is I will heat those up, and then I'll add in like a cup of peas, and that's an easy way to sneak more vegetables into the diet too. And that I like to have everything all at once, so I'll just like I'll like get a bite of chicken and then add in the mashed potatoes, which have the peas in it. Like, I don't know, if you're the person that like eats all the peas on their own and then eats all the chicken, then eats all the mashed potatoes, like that weirds me out. I'm not a fan of that. I like to have I like to kind of mix everything together. You know, I like smoothies, so it kind of just fits what I do a little bit better. And that's pretty much it for the diet. I will scale the portions up or scale up the snacks depending on what I want to do with my body weight, or cut them back depending on what I want to do with my body weight. So I'm maintaining right now, and that kind of maintains my body weight pretty well. And that's pretty much it. It's pretty straightforward. I really don't overthink it, but it just kind of follows those the handful of principles I laid out at the start. So next question, will I get back into longer workout vlogs? So I do plan on getting back into these at some point. I didn't want to do them in the winter just because I don't want to be down here for like an extended period of time, and I'm just freezing. I'm very cold. I didn't prepare any wood for my wood stove this winter, so it would get annoying, like wearing all those clothes and putting the mic on, and then like taking the sweatshirt off that has my mic on. It just turns into a nightmare. I know it's a bunch of excuses, but I do, as it gets warmer out, I do plan on getting back into these, at least doing them like once every couple weeks or something, because I do have fun with them, and I think it's an enjoyable way to go about it, and it obviously gets to show you what my workout truly looks like with basically no editing. So I really do enjoy that, and I know you guys do too, so I do plan on getting back to them at some point. So next question. what keeps me motivated to train? This one is, I'm going to have a hard time answering it because I can't really pinpoint exactly what it is, but there's a few things that come to mind. So the first one is I kind of live by the almost cliche philosophy of you're either getting better or you're getting worse. So you kind of just have to pick your poison. And as corny as it is, like, would you rather slowly kind of degrade over time, or would you rather and let that be your suffering, or would you rather lift and suffer for an hour 5 days a week and actually continue to get better, generally speaking? And for me, I think it's going to be the latter. Like, it's just picking between the two, regardless of whether I actually cared about bodybuilding or lifting or not. That just is more appealing to me just by my own nature. And I would say that being jacked is fun and it's cool. I don't enjoy it in like the same way that I did when I was younger, maybe to like help build that confidence or break down any self-doubt that I had. Like, I'm a confident person and I don't really struggle with self-doubt anymore, but I still enjoy I enjoy a lot about lifting. I have a lot of appreciation for the mechanics of lifting. I have a lot of appreciation for anatomy and the muscular system. Like, it's all stuff that I do find quite interesting. So lifting obviously allows me to like kind of fully embody that appreciation I have for the entire process and for the human body. So I would say that keeps me generally interested in it. But as far as specifically motivation goes, I just it keeps you. It changes your decision making for the better, I find. So if I know I have a workout to do that I want to perform well on, or at least not suffer through, I'm going to take my sleep more seriously, and by that effect, I become a healthier person. And if I put in a good effort during a session and I create a lot of muscle growth stimulus, I'm going to eat something healthy that kind of supports and helps me grow, versus just being able to kind of more or less eat whatever you want. It doesn't really matter that much if you get in enough protein or fruits and vegetables, all that kind of stuff, or if you stay hydrated or whatnot. So it's the glue that kind of holds together a very healthy lifestyle, I find. So that definitely motivates me. Not necessarily in terms of like I'm super motivated and excited to have a healthy lifestyle. It's more so just motivation by wanting to avoid the unhealthy lifestyle. But I do definitely struggle with motivation to lift sometimes, and I think that's just part of being like a lifelong lifter. It just becomes kind of something that has to become a little bit more mundane, and you have to take a little bit more of a sustainable approach. And it definitely does come in phases, but I would say part of what motivates me is, even when I'm not motivated at the moment, I know at some point the motivation will come back, and I don't want to let myself down when I'm in a phase like that. So if I'm somebody that I know I'm going to go through these rough stretches of, say, 6 months where my motivation is low and I'm really just relying on the habit of lifting to get me through, I know my motivation is going to come back and it's going to spark back up again in 6 months. And I would much, much rather be in a place where I've at least maintained, if not grown a little bit from 6 months ago, rather than somebody that just like took 6 months off the gym and now you're back to square one, kind of starting all over again. So that keeps me motivated, but otherwise I kind of just rely on my intrinsic motivation, even though it will kind of ebb and flow, which I think it does kind of for everybody. It's just a matter of understanding that, and being able to think a little bit bigger picture and reflect on how your mindset fluctuates in recent history. I would also say that lifting is very tricky for most people. It's very tricky to stay motivated for, because it almost kind of like if you guys have ever seen like those super motivational like business entrepreneurship type videos. Like, I remember watching a Gary Vee video, just kind of stumbling upon it. I was probably like 17 or 18 at the time, and I remember watching that video and I was like, huh, like it gets you all, it's like obviously very motivating. And one of the comments that I saw on that specific video was, I hate these videos because all they do is get you all hyped up with nowhere to go. And I kind of realized that almost applies to lifting in a way, because you get all hyped up to make all this progress. Then it's like, all right, well, you're all excited to get all jacked. And it's like, okay, well, now be patient for 7 years. And it's like, okay, like you're kind of all hyped up with nowhere to go, so you just have to make it more sustainable, and you can't really rely on motivation 24/7. But I would say any way that you can cultivate and maintain motivation is going to be very important, and ultimately you have to be motivated a lot of the time to make lifting sustainable, because otherwise it's a very big physical and mental energy investment. So you want to be motivated, and whatever motivates you is, generally speaking, going to be valid, in my opinion. So next question, why do so few lifters become advanced? So this one, there's kind of two things that come to mind for me on this. And the first one is most people don't really contemplate if they want to become advanced or not. You take any valuable thing in life and it comes with a lot of sacrifice, and especially the farther you want to go, the more sacrifice it comes with. And a lot of the time, the people that achieve the most are quite miserable because of all the sacrifices that have to come with it. So you really have to kind of ask yourself that question, weigh the pros and cons, where is it worth, are the sacrifices of becoming an advanced lifter actually worth it? Because you could say, like, yeah, I'm willing to work hard, I'm willing to put in the work to achieve that, and I want that really bad. And for some people, that's absolutely true, but some people kind of never realize that they don't actually want to become advanced because they don't want to sacrifice what needs to be done to get to that point. And there's nothing wrong with that either. I think a lot of the fitness industry says if you don't lift and become the best lifter you ever can, then you're just full of excuses and whatnot. But for a lot of people, they just aren't willing to sacrifice what needs to be done to become an advanced lifter, but they'll never admit that to themselves, and it keeps them kind of spinning their wheels they'll kind of like make an attempt to get better, and then excuse hits, and then they try this, and excuse hits, they'll try this, and an excuse hits. And a lot of the time, these excuses they're not valid excuses to not become an advanced lifter, but they're really just forms of their own lack of desire to make that sacrifice kind of showing up in all these places. So if you find yourself not really wanting it, and you find your desire to achieve that advanced physique isn't quite as strong as your desire to avoid the sacrifice that needs to be made to even get that, then it's probably just not worth becoming an advanced lifter for that specific person. So I think that's a big part of it. I would also say that a lot of people do kind of fall into like a victim type mindset. I find this is very prevalent on websites like Reddit. So if you are somebody that does want to become advanced, you have to kind of avoid these places at all costs. And what I find is that you can even just take the most obvious example of Reddit, where there's the page of Natty or Juice, and I was posted on there once. It was overwhelmingly positive, in my opinion. It was probably 80 to 90% of people did believe I was natural. That might be a little bit generous, but I remember being surprised at how many people actually thought I was natural. And you have to be aware of people telling you that achieving something like that is just not naturally attainable or not possible or whatnot, because you have to look at the incentive of those people. And of course you can say, well, what about the incentive of people to tell you that you can go farther than you realistically can go? And of course those people have a very straightforward incentive. They are, let's say, a fake natty takes PEDs so they can stand out physique wise, and then you think that they have all the secrets to get big, so you pay for their program or whatever, and that's obviously the incentive for them. But what about the incentive for the people that tell you a certain physique isn't possible? Well, one, cynicism likes company, misery likes company. That's a very common phrase. So what these people are doing, generally speaking, even if they don't have a specific monetary motivation to tell you that what you want to achieve isn't possible, it's really just their own envy or hate for another person, kind of masked as them trying to be this like pragmatic, realistic savior to prevent people from wasting their time going after something that is impossible to achieve. And they're generally very miserable people that are trying to kind of like, they're trying to mask hate as love, and it's very toxic, and I hate the word toxic, but that's just how sites like Reddit are. It's how certain YouTube channels are that are very oriented on trying to call other people out and trying to shrink your expectations of what you can do as a lifter. And if this gets to people, it's like, yeah, I mean, that's going to prevent you from becoming advanced, especially because humans are social creatures, and when you're on a social media where you have a tangible representation of what a certain demographic thinks about a given opinion, where you can clearly see that, whether it's likes or views or upvotes or whatever, and it's all of that versus you, where you already kind of have self-doubt anyways, whose opinion do you think is going to kind of dominate what goes on inside your own head, unless you're particularly strong or have a very particularly good role model. So that's kind of my thoughts on that, and that's part of my incentive for keeping my channel going, is to be not like a direct role model to people, but at least an example of somebody that does stay pragmatic and realistic, but also like genuinely optimistic about what is possible. So that's my thoughts on that. And obviously I try and talk the talk, but also walk the walk too, and that's why I filmed the 18-inch arm series. Next question, to get back to some direct training stuff. Do you deload? So I personally don't deload, but there are certain cases where you do need to dial back your training in kind of a quantifiable manner. So what I would say is, for a deload, first you have to ask yourself, why are you deloading? And if it's because you keep getting burned out of training, you keep getting injured, and you just have this crazy amount of general systemic fatigue to where you just can't bring yourself to go to the gym, is your program even sustainable based on your lifestyle? Do you have enough days off? These are all questions you kind of have to ask yourself. So if you're somebody that is, say, quite injury prone, then change the way that you lift, whether it's the exact like philosophy of technique that you embody. Maybe cheat reps and using super heavy weight isn't the right way to go, even if some people can get away with that. Maybe you have to go with a little bit more stricter technique, or use generally more stable lifts. Sometimes you have to do a little bit lower volume. Sometimes you have to lift with more control. Sometimes you have to dial down your overall frequency. Sometimes you need more days off to actually kind of recover, at least mentally, throughout the week. So these are all kind of questions you have to ask yourself to know if your training is actually sustainable. And in the vast majority of cases, assuming you have a relatively average lifestyle, you should be able to continuously train for hypertrophy without needing to deload. But there can be cases where a temporary rotation or a deload or a devolume can make sense. And I do have a video going over this. I believe it was episode 6 or 7 of the Road to 18-inch Arm series, posted about a year ago. But when it comes to situations like this, if you are systemically fatigued, whether it's from your program, whether it's from your lifestyle, whether it's from stress, a lack of sleep, anything along the lines of this, a devolume is a really good idea. And typically the way to go about this is to do your regular split, your regular exercise selection, weights, rep range, all this kind of stuff. Just tone your volume down. So instead of doing 2 to 4 sets per lift, just do 1, maybe 2, and that will allow you to get your frequency, to get your intensity, and kind of check all these boxes that you need to check to keep the ball rolling. But the volume is so low that your recovery is just so much better, and your fatigue added is very low. So if you don't sleep very well for a few nights in a row, and you need kind of a week of slightly less fatiguing training, that's a really good way to keep training rather than just taking a week off or something like that. So that makes a lot of sense. A deload can also be useful for specific cases. So if you are getting like nagging like hip or knee pain and you need to take time off of, say, training like your squat patterns or your hinges, then you can just take a week off of those lifts and keep doing everything else, assuming it feels totally fine. Let that kind of freshen up a little bit and then go back to it the next week. In a situation like that, if you still kind of feel that pain and it's very lift specific, and you find that one specific lift is causing pain, so say you're doing like, say you're getting like some elbow pain from preacher curls, but your alternating dumbbell curls and your cable curls feel totally fine, you can keep training biceps, but just rotate preacher curls to maybe a different variation for a week, 2, 3, maybe up to 4 weeks. Let the preacher curls kind of freshen up, and then you can go back to them maybe with a slightly more conservative approach and make it a little bit more sustainable overall. So that's my thoughts on deloading. Next question, easy bar preacher curl versus a machine. So these are very different lifts, and they serve very different purposes. To me, an easy bar preacher curl is a prime mover. It's an S tier lift for biceps, and that's what I built my biceps on. Obviously, as you guys saw last year in the Road to 18-inch Arm series. A machine preacher curl has an entirely different resistance profile. Certain machines that have at least an adjustable cam, or maybe the lever arm acts in a way that kind of resembles something like a preacher curl that is going to be more length biased, that can replace a preacher curl for sure, especially if it's like a prime or a strive machine where the plates are loaded on the top peg. That more or less is the exact same thing with maybe a hair more stability, but that's kind of negligible at that point. I would say your standard say selectorized or hammer strength plate loaded preacher curl machine, that's going to be short biased at best. Those machines are they're much different. They still kind of have that stability, but the resistance profile is really the main feature of a preacher curl. And when it lacks that, it's just an entirely different lift. So it's not the same. You're not going to get the same benefits that you would from a preacher curl with like a machine replacement. So it's one of those cases where I can confidently say in the vast majority of cases, the free weight preacher curl is going to be better than its machine alternatives. Next one, advice on JM press. So my advice here, one is go for the deep stretch. This is a lift and it's a movement that allows you to get good tension in a very high degree of elbow flexion. So go for it. It's a case where you're never going to get that anywhere else in your program. And I'm not here to say like that stretch is just magical for growth or anything, but it's a range of motion that is completely untapped in any other lift. Even if you go so far to like so deep into elbow flexion on any type of press, peak tension will always be at like about 90 degrees of elbow bend. So I would say take advantage of that lift and get yourself to a point where you can comfortably handle those deep stretches. If you have to start with lighter weight and incrementally push yourself into a more challenging weight to let your elbows acclimate to that lift and that range of motion, that's totally fine. Be a little bit more patient, maybe use kind of a temporary placeholder lift in the meantime, like I mentioned in the other video, and that will get you going on JMs. If I have any other wisdom, the general rule of thumb that you want to follow, you want to have a shoulder joint width grip. If you're outside of shoulder width, and keep in mind your actual shoulder joint is narrower than the outside of your side delt, so this isn't shoulder width for me, this is shoulder width. Not this, it's this. Two very different things. If you're outside shoulder width, it's going to be a lot of front delts, kind of pecs. It just feels like this weird kind of tricep biased press. So if anything, go a little bit narrower than you think you need to. Alex Leonidas recommends a thumb's width distance as your grip. I say you can go a little bit wider, but still you want to keep it pretty narrow. From here, from a horizontal perspective, you want to make sure at the bottom, so the deepest part of the stretch, your elbow remains above your shoulder, but below your wrist. So if I'm lying on a bench and the bench is right here behind my back, anywhere in this range is a valid endpoint. So the bar can be down to the chin, can go down to the clavicles. It all comes down to what your arm length is and what your proportions are from your upper arm to your forearm. So if you're up like this and the elbow is above the wrist at the bottom, that's more of a skull crusher. Same thing, if your elbow is behind your shoulder at the bottom, that's more of a close grip bench. JM press is a hybrid, so go for the deepest stretch you can, anywhere between elbow above shoulder and below wrist. So anything in here, that's totally fine. Those are the most important things to follow with the JM press. The rest can all kind of be tweaked to preference, whether that's pausing or whether that's controlling the tempo or how much you flare your elbows. All kind of up to preference, but those are the two fundamentals you have to follow in order to have a proper JM press for hypertrophy, in my opinion. Next question, what do I think about Mike Israetel? It's going to be hard to... I get this question all the time. I would say with Mike Israetel, I think kind of the consensus here is a lot of his good information is his older stuff, and I would agree with that. I would say the modern Mike Israetel, the modern Renaissance periodization is very much business oriented, and it's very much engagement driven. They want to get as many clicks as possible, and that's why they are uploading videos like every single day. It's like the goal is to upload videos, and in order to do that, they have to like search for random things to talk about. So channels like that, generally, I'm not saying the advice is always going to be bad or they're just making stuff up for the sake of making a video, even if that does like genuinely happen on occasion. I would say generally you want to avoid channels like that clearly show they have their own best interest purely in mind. That isn't to say that their entire channel is worthless or anything, because I don't want... that's not my opinion either. I still think there's a lot of valuable information. So here's what I'll say for Mike Israetel. I think it's important to have somebody like him to balance out the other side of the fence, because for years, like 4 years, it was very much powerlifting dominated in the bodybuilding areas. Like bodybuilders were talking about 5-3-1 and their big 3 lifts and their 1 rep maxes, and it was like you couldn't get away from it. Like if you trained slightly higher reps, or if you trained like anything that wasn't the big 3, you were just like, oh, it's just an accessory lift. The real lifts and the real way to get big is with the big 3 lifts. But they would never justify what they're saying, but it had so much like social proof because everybody just followed this exact philosophy. And then you get his channel where he's actually talking about like the pump and mind muscle connection, and it's like, of course those aren't the drivers of muscle growth, but they're also still relatively useful. And he's talking about lifts that aren't the big 3. So there's a lot of value in just having a completely different perspective. But I would also say that he has gone too far with it, I think, in a lot of cases, to where he's so focused on like creating new lifts and technique and getting a deep stretch. You can see it just the way he lifts, and he's completely lost sight of intensity. And I have nothing against toning down your intensity, just because at his stage where he's like 50, like, and he's retired from bodybuilding, he doesn't have to train like an all-out 22-year-old that's an intermediate that wants to become advanced. Like it's a very different thing, and I think that's totally fine. But I think when he's somebody that positions himself as a figure of authority, and where he's constantly trying to show you how to train, and his reps like don't slow down much, I think that's a problem, because you can probably grow when you're on drugs like he is, but when you're natural and you train with the intensity that he brings to the vast majority of his workouts, to where he can like fly the concentric up and he kind of cheats a little bit but doesn't really need to, but does it anyways for whatever reason, like that's not a way that you want to train. And I think a lot of people that follow his techniques, if you're natural, you're probably not getting that much out of it. I mean, like minor differences aside, the vast majority of jacked natural lifters all lift in a relatively similar way. And when something looks so drastically different to that, it can be a red flag. And I do think in this case, it is a red flag. And the tough part is he used to train really hard, and he used to train pretty well. Like I've seen those old videos of him, like incline benching 315 for 10 with pretty good technique, generally speaking. And it's like, that's what got him to where he is, and now he's gone so extreme in the other way. And it's I can't say that I enjoy to see that, but I don't just want to make it seem like everything he does is wrong and there's no value in what he says. But I think it is, when you look at what he says now, I think it's worth taking everything he says with a grain of salt, because he's put people in that position by making some outrageous claims. And it's like, once you taint 5% of your content, then that grain of salt kind of has to be applied to everything you say until you prove otherwise. So he's put himself in that position, unfortunately, and it is what it is. So last one, kind of a more fun one here. What equipment would I get for my next home gym? So here's what I would do. I would build an exterior barn. Ideally, I'd love to have a bigger piece of property where I can build a barn and maybe have even like a 2-story gym. That would be excellent if I was in a good enough position to be able to do that. What I would do is I would keep this Maxicam row machine right here. That's nice and lengthened biased, plate loaded, beautiful grip. It's just, it's a beauty of a machine that is unfortunately from a company that is no longer in business. But I would absolutely keep that, and I hope I can keep that for the rest of my life, because that Maxicam does not exist anymore. So that's what I would keep. I would also get, let's see, I'll just go through the stuff I got here. So I'd keep the Smith. I love my hammer strength preacher curl. I love my Cybex pec deck. The lat pull down, I can't wait to get rid of. That thing's a piece of junk. Here, I'll see if I can turn my camera this way. It's this kind of, where is it? Gray bar right here. That's part of the lat pull down. The only reason I have that thing is because I have short ceilings down here. So if I was to get a nice lat pull down, they're usually 8 feet. My ceilings are 7, so very limited in terms of options there, especially on the used market, which is where I get most of my stuff. This hammer strength plate loaded machine, it's okay. It's very short bias, so it does feel kind of awkward. It's probably not worth the space that it takes up, but it's still fun just for variety. And the single arm pull down, even if it isn't perfectly lengthened biased or mid biased or whatnot, it's still it's still a very good lift. And I'd say the range of motion on that is big enough to where the plates actually do go high enough to where it is kind of a mid-range bias lift. And for lats, especially vertical pull, I find that feels pretty good. The chest press is pretty awkward, so I'm not a huge fan of that. Even if it is decent, it's not really a primary lift I'd use. I do have this Titan squat rack here that I think is pretty solid, so I'd probably keep this, especially for the multi-grip pull-up bar and the lever arms. But what I would ultimately do, if I had to add a couple more pieces of equipment, I would get a Cybex Bravo functional trainer. I would never, ever, ever, ever be able to justify the price. I think they're $5,000 used, like 8 or 9, 10 grand new. Like, I just can't fathom paying that for like a cable machine, but they are pretty sweet, very versatile, and I would love to have one. That's more of a dream than a realistic one. I would say a pendulum squat. The Fettle Fitness one is probably what I'd go with. They're like $1,800, which it really covers squats for the rest of my life, so I probably would do something like that. What else would I get? A nice T-bar row machine just for variety from this Maxicam machine, and I mean, that's pretty much it. I would love to get a dumbbell rack and have mirrors in front of it. There's something that I definitely miss about just being able to go grab a quick set of dumbbells and be able to just rep out some lateral raises or alternating dumbbell curls. Olympic dumbbells, as useful and cost efficient as they are, it's a total pain to load plates on and load the clamps on, and every time you want to use them, you have to do it twice because there's two sides on two dumbbells. It's super annoying. So that's probably what I would get, and then from there I would just load up with selectorized machines. So like Nautilus machines or even Cybex, like those are kind of the top two brands that I like as far as selectorized stuff goes. Then I'd get a gym pin and just become insanely strong, and that's pretty much it. So if you guys have any other questions, any expanded thoughts on the stuff I talked about here, I'd love to hear them, and I probably will make a part 2. So yeah, like I said, feel free to leave some questions in there, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So see you guys in the next one.